is a wet and wild ride careening down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. Shooting the rapids is sure to get your adrenaline pumping, and the frigid water will just about stop your heart. Screaming and splashing through the rapids is a thrill, but the Grand Canyon offers much more than sheer excitement. Our week-long journey starts a few miles below the Glen Canyon Dam. It takes 2 large rafts and tons of gear for our expedition. There's no turning back once you hit the river, so every aspect of the trip must be carefully planned. A good life vest is the most important piece of equipment, just in case someone goes for a swim, and it's essential that it fit correctly.
How's that feel there, Bill?
It feels good.
You look like a river raft already, haven't even left.
I know it. I know. I worked on this look.
It's working for you, man. It's working for you.
Thanks.
There are more than 24 of us, plus 4 guides who will keep us safe and well-fed for the next week. We head out on a warm, sunny day from a calm spot along the river where pioneers crossed the Colorado before there were any bridges.
So this is called Lee's Ferry, and it was run by the guy named John Doyle Lee, actually. And he and a couple of his wives lived up this little side canyon up here at a place called the Lonely Dell Ranch. And he was a Mormon man. And some people think that John Doyle Lee did a little bit more than run the ferry. And so some people think that the Mormon church sent John Doyle Lee out here to maybe protect him a little bit from the U.S. government. At that time, the Mormon church and the U.S. government were almost at war. Not really, but Mormons didn't trust anybody that they didn't know. But they think that he dressed up like a bunch of Indians and they rounded up this wagon train and they killed men, women, and children. And so the government finally caught up with him out here, and he was executed by a firing squad, I believe.
With that bloody bit of American history behind us, we head down the river, a bag of beer and soft drinks dragging in the water to keep cool. The first part of our trip is a quiet cruise through Marble Canyon, where the gorge is only 600 feet wide. This narrow canyon was an ideal spot to build a bridge. Actually, 2. The first Navajo bridge, built in 1929, is now just for pedestrians. It's a great vantage point to look down on the river. The new bridge is the only place where vehicles can cross the river for more than 300 miles downstream. We're riding in motorized 30-foot-long rafts made of, hopefully, puncture-proof rubber with metal frames. Appropriately named baloney boats because of their sausage-like shape, they are designed to roll over the rapids. But it's still a thrilling ride. Even these big boats do flip on them. For smaller rafts with just oars and paddles to maneuver, shooting the rapids is a lot more challenging. With waves of water crashing over garage-sized boulders, a slight miscalculation can spell disaster. The Colorado is one of the most difficult whitewater rivers in the world, and even with the most modern equipment, rafters do die here. John Wesley Powell made the first successful trip down the Grand Canyon in 1869 in wooden boats. But rafting the river didn't become really popular until the mid-1960s. That's when the Glen Canyon Dam was built, which now controls the water flow, making the river much more consistent and predictable most of the time.
In 1983, they had a huge snowpack up in the Rockies, and it filled that reservoir up really fast. And so much, in fact, that they thought that they were going to lose Glen Canyon Dam. They actually had to put plywood at the top of the dam, which is almost 800 feet tall, to keep the water from coming over the top. And so what they had to do is just let out as much water as they could. And so they, chunks of concrete and sandstone were shooting out of the spillways, and they were about that close to losing the whole thing. And, you know, guides down here did not know what was going on, and all of a sudden they were going from, you know, 8,000 CFS to 96,000 CFS, which is what they let it out at. And so there's a picture of water cascading over the top of this boulder right here, just lapping up against that stuff right there. So that driftwood was deposited earlier at about 120,000 CFS.
Wow.
Since all of the water in the river is released from the bottom of the dam, 200 feet deep in Lake Powell, it's always cold, about 46 degrees.
That's cool. All right, guys, so you're sitting back up here next. It's so cool. I got water all over me now. You have to keep your mouth closed. And this. Now here, we haven't seen nothing yet. Look at this. Here we go.
In just our first day on the river, we crash and splash through more than a dozen rapids, leaving us all drenched, chilled, and smiling. But a raft trip through the Grand Canyon is not all about whitewater. There are long stretches of calm cruising, giving us lots of time to enjoy the spectacular scenery and contemplate how this amazing canyon was formed over the past 6 million years. Traveling down the canyon is like taking a trip back in time. The rushing water slices deeper and deeper into the Earth's crust until you're more than a mile below the rim.
If you consider the Grand Canyon or the Colorado Plateau, where the Grand Canyon is centrally located, as a loaf of bread, and then you take a knife and you put it in the loaf of bread and then stick that into the oven, what's going to happen? The bread's going to kind of rise around the knife, right? So that's kind of what happened here.
This non-stop excavation exposes ancient rock up to 1.7 billion years old, long before plants or animals existed on Earth.
Hey, wow.
We don't spend all of our time in the canyon on the river. Every day we get a chance to stretch our legs, taking hikes up some of the many side canyons that tumble down to the Colorado River. One excursion takes us to the remnants of a Native American settlement. More than 1,000 years ago, Indians lived on a wide spot of the canyon floor and left behind shards of their pottery.
They dig a hole and they'd line it with rocks and then build a fire, and then they'd put something over the top, and actually they'd heat the rocks up and then the fire would go out. They'd layer it and they'd put these agaves in there and then put more rocks on top, layer it, cover it up with dirt, and let them roast. And we actually tasted some a couple weeks ago in like kind of the traditional way, and it's almost like an artichoke heart, the way that it's textured.
Ooh, that's getting a little deep.
This is pretty cool footage.
One slot canyon we hiked into was so steep and narrow, many of us needed a helping hand.
Okay, where do I put my foot?
Wherever you want, because I have you.
Right hand all the way on the corner.
But our effort was rewarded with a refreshing shower tumbling into a pool over a rock ledge.
55-degree water.
All right, here comes Roger Wolf. Roger, have you had your cardiologist approve of this?
I really need a bath.
I know you do. 1, 2, 3. Oh, he's down. Oh, no.
Some of the hikes were strenuous and at times dangerous, creeping along a narrow ledge above a frightening abyss. But each trek had its own reward. Another waterfall, or more spectacular scenery. One memorable lunch stop was at a spot called Red Wall Cavern, a sand-floored alcove carved into the canyon wall that's a great place to toss around a frisbee. After a few days in the canyon, we began to feel like, or at least look like, grizzled explorers, perhaps part of Major Powell's crew. But in truth, we were pretty pampered. The guides fixed hearty meals, while we enjoyed happy hour with the beer or booze we brought along.
Happy hour. We survived the first day. We brought from Fort Collins, not only ourselves, but our favorite. One of the other wonderful things about our fine city.
Since the rafts are so large, we could bring as much liquor as we wanted. And for some on our trip, happy hour seemed to last all day.
So we're going to climb an elevation about, I would say about 300 feet.
Our big boats even had room for firewood, so we could warm up on chilly evenings. Each night's campsite was unique. A sandy spot at the water's edge, next to a waterfall gushing from the canyon wall. Up in a slot canyon where we could take shelter from a howling windstorm.
So what are you going to do if there's a flash flood?
Die.
Have another beer?
Another beer.
You're like our comrades.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have another beer.
In a cactus garden overlooking the river.
Look at them, they're swimming. Oh my gosh. Those are the Canadians. They're like polar bears. Look at them. Wow, is that Travis?
A beautiful spot, but you had to be careful when nature called. Dark of night. Tents were available, but mostly we slept under the stars so we could enjoy the spectacle of sunrise and sunset coloring the canyon. Each morning after packing up our gear, we headed back on the river, and soon we're splashing through whitewater again. By the end of our trip, we will encounter, enjoy, endure, conquer, suffer, shoot, survive more than 150 rapids. For one especially gnarly rapid, our guides outfitted all of us with Viking helmets. A bit out of place in the Arizona desert, perhaps, but the crazy caps did seem to pump up our courage. Despite our bravado, or perhaps because of it, sometimes the river took its toll. We smashed 2 motors on hidden rocks. Fortunately, we had spares and were able to make repairs.
Gotcha.
After 5 days together on the river, sharing meals, braving the water, the wind, the heat of the sun, and the chill of the night, our little band of adventurers from all across the country felt like a family. So we made camp early, one of the choice spots along the river.
It's right in there.
Hercules.
Everybody at home's gonna see this.
What for?
Played some bocce ball. Mixed up buckets of margaritas and had a party.
I love your facial expression.
All right, in a round of applause, was these guys better, or was Laura and I better? So sorry to just
This is just start.
It was a time for celebration and reflection.
Okay, what do you think?
Hey John, you know, this is the greatest thing what we have done in our lives so far.
Absolutely. I agree.
We want to repeat it.
Awesome. So much fun.
Sweet.
Can you do the Rob thing again?
You mean fall in the water? Fall in the water, get covered with sand, and then go in the water again? Maybe not.
How many times have you been in the river today?
3 times.
2 times. Okay.
Right?
3. This is the parents of the most incredible family I've ever been around. I have to say. No, it's true. They have great kids.
If we didn't like them much, we wouldn't have taken them with us.
I know. And there's Raj. The man who chose this tour.
Set it all up.
Set it all up. Did it.
And he got lost at the top of the mountain.
And he got lost at the top of the mountain, but
We thought you were dead.
we were worried. We were absolutely concerned. We were concerned.
Well, okay. We were looking for your body then.
Our last day on the river brought the last of the rapids and some of the worst. Legendary lava falls, 2 back-to-back drops plummeting 27 feet. After 20 seconds of terror, it was over, and we all survived. The next morning, a helicopter swoops into the canyon to lift us back to civilization. We get one last look at the mighty Colorado, leave the Grand Canyon behind, but take with us grand memories that will last a lifetime.